Hello and welcome to my Aries full moon deep dive video. This event occurs on October the 20th, 2021. Now what I'm going to do is explain to you first what an Aries full moon represents. What phase of the year are we in? What can we broadly expect over the next 2 weeks? I'm then going to dive deep and share with you the event chart in terms of the natal astrology and how other planetary influences are feeding into the energy of the full moon and how they are going to affect it too. Finally, I'm going to share with you your forecast for each of the 12 zodiac signs based on the sun or the ascendant, whichever you choose to view. So please stay with me for that. If you are new to my channel, I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. Also, if you'd like to get your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning, you can subscribe to this on the link underneath this video. I've written these for over 25 years and my work is featured on some of the biggest portals around the world and by the UK Press Association and by the most read daily newspaper here too. Now, if you would like to understand what year 2022 will hold for you as an individual based on your time, date and place of birth, you can order your personal horoscope now, but get the rest of this year free, as well as a character analysis and 30% off. So please see the link below. So this event occurs on the 20th at 3:56 p.m. Universal Central Time. Now, if you are based elsewhere in the world, please see on the screen now when exactly this event will occur on the 20th for you. So what does an Aries full moon represent? Well, Aries is the sign of initiation. It's the first zodiac sign, so it's very much about I. The sign of Libra is the 7th zodiac sign, so it's very much about we. Now we need both. We need the go-getting energies of Aries to get things off the ground. So when we have the vernal equinox and the sun moves into Aries, it's our opportunity to approach things with gusto and enthusiasm. The ruler of the sign of Aries is Mars, which can seem a bit brash at times, but it is risk-taking and it lives on its impulse. So that's exciting. But the moon in this location is inclined to be a little bit restless itself. So on the other side of the heavens, we still have the sun in the sign of Libra, where it's been for just over 27.5 days. But also we've had Mars and Mercury going through Libra too. So it really has been a case of Libra season. But Mercury was retrograde through to the 18th of October and doesn't come out of shadow until the 2nd of November. So just having Mercury in the sign of relating suggests that there has been some potential with the retrograde for some crossed wires. But I think it's more about the new moon, which occurred on the 6th, that really flagged up what an electric new moon it was. Ordinarily, the Libra new moon is about embracing the opportunity to improve our relationships, meeting somebody new and significant, finding an accord, celebrating the things we have in common. But that particular new moon had Mars, the ruler of Aries, nestled right beside it, and they were all in a quincunx with the very disruptive energies of Uranus in the sign of Taurus. So I think there has been quite a lot of discussion about shared resources, who does and contributes what, whether we feel that we're being recognised for our efforts in terms of not just money, but just feeling appreciated. That's been important. And I think some people have probably been a lot more assertive than the people they're relating to expected them to be. And other people may have been perhaps a little bit meeker. It just depends on every single person's unique situation and unique natal astrology. So what this event is asking us to do over the next couple of weeks is to make a judgment call on how well those relationships have been developing on the back of that new moon. So if there have been some problems, they will need to be sorted out now. But because Pluto, the planet of transformation, the planet of the underworld, the planet of secrets, the planet of power, and sometimes deep machinations, that's pivoting into this particular event in a T-square. Now, Pluto is not a planet to take lightly. It may be the tiniest, it may be seen as by some astronomers as being a planetoid. Believe me, its impact is incredible. So what we have here is that Pluto is likely to flag up some things that have not been quite so apparent over the last month, or where we have gained greater understanding of what's been going on, it may mean the time has come to actually transform our relationship situation, and that's what Pluto's about. So in the square with the Sun and also the Moon, it can point towards conflict, but particularly around very close relationships linked to the family or linked to a romantic partner that we're deeply emotionally invested in. So if there is a weakness, it is going to come up over the next couple of weeks. But now on the screen you can see the event chart, and you know there's some really good stuff going on here, because based on Universal Central Time, the ascendant for this chart on Greenwich is, you can see, at 23 degrees 17 in the rather humanitarian sign of Aquarius. But we also have Jupiter, the planet of growth and hope, now out of its retrograde, which went on until the 18th of October, and that's nestling right on that first house cusp. So I think that's going to give a potential for enthusiasm and optimism, and it's also suggesting that if we can approach things in a kind of overall way where we're seeing all sides of the story, we're trying to see that sometimes the way we react to situations is because we're human beings, so being a bit more detached, which is a very Aquarius energy. But also you can see that Jupiter and Mars still pretty close to the Sun in Libra, just 4 degrees away. They're in an exact trine, but in a technical sense Jupiter is in the 12th house, which is working behind the scenes, whereas you can see that Mars is in the 8th house. Wow, that's very, very Scorpionic. And of course Mars is the co-ruler, co-regent, the traditional ruler of Scorpio. So I think what that combination is saying is where we feel that some kind of relationship can develop in a positive way, then we can go full steam ahead and events can be sorted out with a great deal of vigour and enthusiasm. Now Jupiter also forges a great link to the Sun. So although there is that very complex T-square between Pluto, the Sun and the Moon, you can already see that there are opportunities to progress. Also Venus at the top of the chart is right on the 10th house cusp. So when it comes to business matters or the wider economy, of course there's been a lot of concern with the supply of goods, distribution, all very sort of Mercury in retrograde issues. The type of contracts that people are getting, again very Libran in Mercury issues, and we are seeing that there has to be some flexing in order to deal with some new realities that have emerged because of COVID, and in the United Kingdom perhaps because of Brexit rule changes as well. But that position of Venus right at the top of the chart suggests that diplomacy can be a mightily fine asset in a professional context, and it's forging a beautiful link also with Mercury. Saturn, however, and also Pluto in this particular event chart are locked away in the 12th house. And that's why, even though in terms of neat analysis of the Aries new moon, it's the first 7th house axis, so the first being self, with the 7th being us or we, but in actual fact, because the Moon and the Sun are in the 2nd and 8th houses, it could definitely be about finances that grappling goes on around, particularly with Pluto there in the 12th house, really getting into the depths of a situation. So some information can come up and come into the open that could surprise, but it could also solve. It just depends. And Saturn actually forges a very constructive link with the North Node in the sign of everyday communication, Gemini. So if we want to talk something through and find solutions, there's a great opportunity to do so. Now, if there is one aspect that's perhaps a little more jarring of all of these, beyond the square between Pluto, the Sun, and the Moon, it's the role of Venus in its quincunx with Uranus, which is pretty well exact. So there could, be some surprises. Uranus points towards the potential for some costs in Taurus, as much as it does rewards. So I just think its link to Venus suggests we can't just front something up and use our people skills. We have to make sure that any financial projects we have are well thought through. So in terms of this Aries full moon, we understand the implications from both sides. So it's not just how we see it, nor it's just how the other person sees it. So we're again trying to find that pivot between the two energies of Aries and Libra. And I think that, having Venus on the 10th house really helps, but the energy of Uranus could be unsettling, could be revelatory, and obviously Pluto can also bring some things into the open where people are trying to use leverage in order to get their way around a situation, perhaps unfairly. So if there is a relationship which is come into its natural close, unfortunately this chart does point towards, even if one side tries to be very fair and logical and humanitarian, all the Aquarius energy that's going on, but the other side is looking at things in a much deeper and much more financially orientated way, there is the potential for some squabbles. So if we can, we need to be mindful of resources and being fair, but also try to come to a conclusion where everyone gets somewhat of what they need. And I think that's really the crunch. Now, in terms of each of the 12 zodiac signs, please stay with me for your forecast. Now, for you, Aries, I really think if there's a relationship that's not been going well and you feel that you've been bending over backwards to be as diplomatic as possible to someone over the last 4 weeks, I think you could reach that point now when you want to be much more to the point, much more direct. But because of the energy of your ruler and it's linked to Jupiter in Aquarius, I think you're still being asked to try to think the best of people. If they end up disappointing you, that's their responsibility. Of course, you can prepare yourself for a disappointment, but don't necessarily assume it will happen. And if you're wanting something good to happen from a relationship, it could be a friendship that actually surprises you by bringing something into the open that really is very helpful to you. Now, Taurus, for you, this particular event occurs across the 6th and 12th house polar opposites. So if you like, there may be something that is going on that's not completely in view. So maybe you need to balance between the physical and emotional sides of your relationships. If you're in a situation where you tend to be very sacrificing around the domestic scene, for example, or doing shopping or taking the kids to school, and the partner doesn't seem to be putting the same amount of energy in, that may be something that you could push back against over the next couple of weeks. But also, this is an interesting event because I feel you're being given a lot of encouragement to learn more about all sorts of issues to do with your well-being. And that doesn't necessarily have to be just in the physical sense, the body. It can be to do with embracing the more spiritual, psychological, even shadow side of your nature. So if a relationship for you isn't working so well and it's impacting on your sense of vitality and your health, think about how you can change things in your world and see if that starts to then have an impact on how you're linking with someone else. But I do feel that if there is something that does need to be sorted out, where someone's not putting in the same amount of consideration as you are, this can be an opportunity to share perhaps some feelings that you've had that you've not felt quite comfortable to open up about. And I think you might surprise yourself with Pluto's help that some things do now come into the open, and that can help to clear the air. Now Gemini, for you, this event occurs across the 5th and 11th house axes, but you have Pluto in the 8th house. And so jealousy is the word that comes up for me for you. Possessiveness, control, is someone imposing those very negative emotions on you. So for example, if you're wanting to go out and spend some time with friends, obviously a lot of social opportunities have been difficult to get over the last couple of years, but a partner is really resentful about that. I think you could push back quite strongly. Then again, if you're so devoted to a relationship, you can't really remember the last time you got together with long-standing buddies, this would be a great chance to actually meet up. But with Pluto in the 8th house, when it comes to your creative talent and your long-term plan, which comes through the energy of the moon in Aries, you may have to be more realistic about how you're going to fund some of your ideas. So yes, your passion for what you're trying to achieve at the moment can be very great because Mars is on the Sun. That's terrific. But it's not just the desire you have to make something happen, it's how it's going to work. Now, intimacy can also be flagged up by the role of Pluto. So if you're someone who's popular and has a lot of friends and a lot of people want to be in contact with you, perhaps this full moon is saying to you, how do you manage your time? But equally, you could have all these connections but feel actually a little bit detached from other people. And perhaps what Pluto is saying to you is, do you need to focus on the associations which really are much more nurturing at a much deeper level? So I'd say to you that this full moon is about quality rather than quantity. And are you scattering your energies between too many people want a piece of you, and you need to narrow it down, but get a good balance between a current romantic tie or your friendships, or if you're single, just be aware that if there are any group politics going on, that can be a drain upon you. Or if you're in a committed relationship, if the other person doesn't allow you to have some of your own space and interest, that could be a factor. But if you are absolutely single, then it is really thinking, where can you get that much deeper connection with people? That's what I feel that you may be yearning for over the next couple of weeks. Now Cancer, having this particular event going on in your 10th house suggests your emotions are going to be very close to the surface, which is not something you generally appreciate very much. Your ruler, of course, is the moon, so every lunation period has a particular impact upon you. And when I say you're not necessarily happy to have your emotions close to the surface, it's because you can actually be quite private. Your way of dealing with life can often be to withdraw when you're feeling threatened. You have that hard shell. You go left, you go right. If you're not sure, it's not nice for you to suddenly have a beachcomber with their beady eye looking down at you when you're just trying to run back in the sea. So feeling in the spotlight is not something you always appreciate, even if you're in your personal natal chart, you're someone who is more than comfortable taking on more professional responsibilities, which is often the case. But it's that personal stuff that Cancers can be more private around. So I would say, if there's something in your home, emotional or private life where there's a tension in a close relationship, whether it's with an offspring, whether it's with a sibling, whether it's with a partner, a parent, then the next couple of weeks could be quite telling. Pluto squaring Mars and the Sun is, it's very intense. And if something that's been ongoing since the 6th of October hasn't really resolved itself for you, perhaps it's because Uranus is in a part of your situation now which is encouraging you to be much more open-minded about your direction in life, much more flexible. I know that Uranus in Taurus is a fixed sign, but Uranus itself for you in the 11th house is about being more open to more unusual people, being a bit more boho in your approach to life, not being quite so welded to just physical security, having a sense of excitement about your life. So if your whole life is about provision, nurturing for others, but you don't feel very nurtured and fed in terms of your creative strands or your passions, then I think that this particular event can cause a lot of soul searching and conversation over the next couple of weeks. Of course, you want to be secure in your home and family, but I think Mars on the Sun can make you more forceful in its square with Pluto about saying what you feel. And, you know, at times where you may avoid that confrontation, the next couple of weeks could see you, you know, really voicing some deeply held concerns or asserting your right to be a bit more individualistic. Now, Leo, for you the event occurs in your 9th house, which is to do with expansion, optimism, growth, travel, boundaries, borders, higher education, publishing. And the moon there suggests therefore you're desiring a bit of variety. And Mars and the Sun in the 3rd house suggests you can have a lot of physical energy or more physical energy. You want to do something with it. But Pluto in the 6th house once again is reminding you about your obligations to others. But if you are literally the person who's just always clearing up at home after other people, it really is time to put your foot down and create some firmer boundaries. Because remember, Libra is about relating, but it's not about pleasing everyone all the time. It's about finding that pivot, that middle point. So, you know, if other people are not listening, the 9th, 3rd house access to your ideas or your feelings, don't feel that you have to constantly sacrifice your needs and your situation in order to be a people pleaser. So I think some discussions, some perhaps quite frank discussions over who does what can follow over the next couple of weeks. Or for some Leo people, you may just feel, I'm taking some time away from work, I need to look after my needs and my welfare, and I've been sacrificing enough, and I'm jetting off to somewhere that gives me a complete break. And if you can do that, good for you. Now, Virgo, for you, the event occurs in the 8th house of shared finances. Mars and the Sun on the 2nd house suggest you're wanting to be much more impulsive about how you spend money in the here and now, which might be very much against your normal way of doing things. But with Pluto, it's a very deep energy, and it's in your 5th house, and it's been evoking fantastically vivid desires, you know, whether it's been around romance, whether it's been around being more creative. You're wanting to feel a sense of excitement, but you know, even if you're someone who tries to balance the books and be very prudent in your approach, this particular event could see you being, you know, perhaps a little bit more in the moment and splashing out on something that gives you some pleasure. Of course, being an earth sign, you usually want to see some tangible benefits, but even you may be tempted by something. So temptation can call out for you over the next couple of weeks, and it could be even in a hot, steamy clinch as well, if you're lucky. Now, Libra, of course, for you, the moon occurs in your opposite sign. But because you are someone who has worked so hard in recent years, because of the role of Pluto in your 4th house, because of Saturn, because of Jupiter 2 years ago, because of the eclipses that went on between the sign of Cancer and Capricorn across the cardinal angles, you know, you've really worked hard, and there may have been quite a few people who've not been particularly pleasant around your feelings, especially people in the family. And this event can almost be raking up all that stuff again. So how do you deal with it? Well, you can deal with it by being even more dynamic and even more going for what's right for you. Tell people what you're prepared to do, which is often more than others, but Tell them what you're prepared to do over the next couple of weeks, and then pursue what you need to do for yourself. It's up to them then. That's how I see this particular event for you. Now, Scorpio, having your traditional ruler Mars on the Sun right in your 12th house, and the Moon in your 6th house, and Pluto, your modern ruler, in the 3rd house, suggests some information is going to come up over the next couple of weeks, and it could be to do with your work. Now, obviously, with having Saturn and Jupiter in your 4th house, how you've been feeling about things in general has been a major part of your situation for about 4 or 5 months during the big retrogrades. Now, both Saturn and Jupiter are going forwards, but I think you may be waiting to hear a key piece of information, and you're going to get it over the next couple of weeks. But what if it's the piece of information that you don't necessarily want to hear? Well, I would say to you that Venus is in your sector of everyday resources, so some kind of financial short-term gain can come to you, but maybe a rejig is in the works. But even if there's a sense of fear about something changing, is it really the case that you haven't been totally, completely content with what you've been doing for some while? And if the answer to that is yes, it may mean that something that gets pushed into the open now, however much it feels a bit bumpy short term, longer term, it can do you the world of good and liberate you to do something that's so much better for you. And once the Sun moves into your sign later this week, you're really going to get the afterburners on, especially when Mars enters Scorpio on the 30th of October. And that's really going to give you a great opportunity to go on the front foot. And November generally, is a very sparky month. It's like a mini-me of year 2022, but it will give you the chance to be a lot more daring in your approach. Now, Sagittarius, for you, it's all about balancing your time, balancing the people that you spend your best quality time with. There's a lot of energy going on in your 11th house of the future, but the full moon's in your 5th house of your needs, your more individual needs. It could be that someone has got an attraction for you in your friendship circle. What does Pluto mean? Well, just be conscious if that attraction is in any way based on some kind of interest in you, based upon a financial gain. Now, that might sound quite a cynical thing to express, but of course some people do leverage situations all the time. So watch out for a little bit of leverage in a love relationship, or around a friendship, or around some kind of longer term hope. You need to make sure that there's a good balance between your idealism and the reality of your resources, but also expect a good balance from the people that you're discussing things with as well. So don't get too swept away with things, stay grounded, but at the same time you can have some great fun over the next couple of weeks, but also just be aware of not overindulging, I would say as well. Capricorn, for you it's about work-life balance. Mars and the Sun in your 10th house are really giving you a lot of encouragement to aim for the summit, but Pluto in your sign could see you wanting it on your terms. I don't think that's going to be easy. You're more than any other sign aware of the more pre-prescribed expectations of the way things have been done. You have a supreme appreciation of tradition. And if you want to play it completely by the rule book, this new moon could signal some kind of good news around a job or around a goal or ambition. But because the moon is being emphasized in your sector of emotion, it's no good shooting for the stars if your base structure, your support systems aren't very robust. And I think because Pluto squares the Sun and the Moon, that is going to be tested. Or if you're someone who wants to be absolutely individualistic in your approach, there is the potential for you being quite controlling. If I'm really honest, with this full moon, you want it only on your terms at home and at work, and you could meet some big resistance over the next couple of weeks if that's the case. If you're able to toggle a little bit and see that you might get some of what you want, but you might have to compromise a little bit with those you're closest to and those you're associated with professionally. But if it is 100% has to be on your terms, I do think some challenges could lie ahead over the next couple of weeks. Which brings us to Aquarius. Now the moon in the third house is about everyday quick moving information. The ninth house energy of the sun and Mars is about expansion, travel. Now if you're wanting to shake up your world and make it much more exciting, but somebody close to you wants to keep it exactly as it is, that could be the pressure point. The third and the ninth house are quite mental. The position of Pluto is quite psychological. So something could come into the open. You could get a text message or email which surprises you. It could be wounding. Someone may finally open up about a secret they've held or an opinion of your way of doing things, which could be quite difficult to hear. But on the other token, if you're more integrated with your emotional and spiritual and psychological sides, having Jupiter on the first house of this particular event gives you a lot of encouragement to be more free-spirited and go with who you are, your natural Aquarius way of thinking about the world. But you have to constantly just be keeping an eye on what may be going on behind your back with Pluto in the 12th house, because a lot of Aquarius people have felt very hard done by in recent years, because it's a sense that there's been a lot of plotting, a lot of secret machinations, a lot of excluding. It's been extremely painful. So generally speaking, the next couple of weeks can be quite upbeat, but just keep an eye on what people are up to and what their motivations are. Which brings us to Pisces. And for you, Pisces, this event occurs in your second house of everyday money and self-worth, but there's a big thrust there with Mars and the Sun together in the part of your horoscope to do with resources, longer term resources. So with Pluto in your 11th house, you can't be idealistic about money, and also you can't be too idealistic about friendships. If you're being too idealistic about friendships, say for example you're talking about going into business with someone and you don't have clearly defined roles, there's not properly constructed terms of reference, you don't get some kind of legally binding agreement involved in terms of the money that's going in, you could really be making something happen which seems positive in the short term but could have some DNA threaded into it that may not be so easy to manage going down the track. So also the second 8th house axis can be about intimacy. Is it true that you're actually attracted to someone in your friendship circle, but maybe you don't want to make a move because you're trying to protect yourself, which is entirely understandable? Pluto in this T-square is very, very complex, and it just suggests that the desire side of your nature can be very strong at the moment. And yes, you can go for a goal or, to get closer to someone, and you may succeed, but just be aware of your tactics and approach. That is really important at this time. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'm wishing you a very positive Aries full moon, but for now, good luck and goodbye.